Okay, so today we're looking at prime and composite numbers. Now, I'm going to spend a bit of time in this video just introducing you to the definitions of these numbers, as well as some conceptual ideas before we get into really working with these types of things. But to introduce these two, I'll talk about primes first. So, a prime number also, sorry, it's important to understand that the numbers we're going to be dealing with here are going to be positive integers. Now, what I mean by an integer is just a whole number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 100 and more. We're not going to be dealing with fractions or decimals or any portions, any parts of a whole. We are just dealing with whole numbers or integers, in other words. Now, a prime number, the first one we're going to talk about, this is one that essentially only has two factors. So these factors being the number itself and 1. Because we know that anytime we multiply a number by 1, we get itself. So a couple of examples of these are, 2, 3, and 5. Now, each of these numbers are prime. So that means we can't make 2 out of anything other than 1 and 2. So if we were to multiply 1 and 2, we'd get 2. So 2 is only divisible by itself and the number 1. The number 3, once again, we can only make this out of 1 and 3. And 5, we only make this out of 1 and 5. So there's actually a little bit of a kind of debate going on about whether we think of 1 as a prime number or whether we think of it sort of as a unit. Now, I personally like to think of this just as a unit. Now, what I mean by that, it's kind of just the smallest possible whole number without being 0. So 1 has its own unique properties, kind of like the number 0. So one of these massive properties is that it can be multiplied by any number to just give us that number. We can think of it as just giving an identity to that number. In the same way, we can get down to the number 1 by dividing any number by itself. So here we're not going to think of 1 so much as a prime number. We're going to just think of it as its own unique thing, kind of like the number 0. Now, the commonalities between these three numbers is that the only factors it has is just 1 and it. 1 and 2, 1 and 3, 1 and 5. Now, composite numbers, I like to think of these as, when you look at the word composite, well, that to me sounds like the word composed. So when we say something is composed of certain things, it's made up of things, essentially, for lack of a better explanation. But with composite numbers, we are looking for numbers that are composed of other numbers. So a couple of examples here, we have maybe 6, 9, and 10. Now you'll notice that with these numbers, yes, they have factors of, 1 and 6, 1 and 9, 1 and 10 in the same way that prime numbers do, but they have extra factors that can multiply together to make up these numbers. So to get 6, we can multiply 3 and 2. To get 9, we can multiply 3 by 3. And 10, we can multiply 5 by 2. So that's how we can classify these types of numbers. We can think of primes as, well, to get this number, I can only multiply 1 by the number. So as an exercise, I'll get you to think of another prime number. Now, I'm thinking of 7, for example. 7 is another one of these numbers that we can't multiply. We can't essentially multiply anything by anything to get 7 that's not 1 and 7. Now, another composite number, for example, would be 12. And 12 actually has even more factors. 12, obviously, it has a factor of 1 and 12, but this is kind of redundant because that just classify as the prime numbers. But 12 we can make out of 6 and 2, but we can also make it out of 3 and 4. So composite numbers can have a variety of different factors. You can probably have a go at looking at any numbers and try to find which ones have a lot of factors compared to which don't have as many. So this is just a bit of an introductory video just to get you used to how we can classify these numbers. And it's more or less just the fact that prime, I'm actually going to write a dot point here. Its only factors are itself and 1. And composite numbers, it has more than these two factors. With these two factors being itself and 1. So that is just a bit of an introduction into prime and composite numbers. And in the next video, we are going to look at creating factor trees and seeing some patterns that arise when we make these for composite numbers. I'll see you there.